Hi friends, and welcome to section 3 of chapter 6, equations with rational coefficients, which means we're going to be messing around with decimals and fractions. Now the decimals aren't bad, fractions I think we'll have to do a little bit of practicing on. Okay, so again we're just going to remember what is the goal of algebra. Our goal is to get the variable alone by undoing the math that's with it. Okay, so just remember that is our goal. So when we go for rational coefficients, this means we're going to have decimals and fractions next to our variables. So for instance, 16 equals 0.25 n. Okay, so right now we have 0.25 times n. So to undo multiplication, we divide. So we're going to divide by 0.25. Those turn into 1, so that disappear. Ninja 1. Watcha! So n on that side, and then 16 divided by 0.25 is 64. Okay? And yes, calculators are totally allowed. It's all good. Let's try another one, number 2. Negative 2.8p equals 4.2. So again, the decimals just work like any other number. Right now we're multiplying by negative 2.8. This is not a subtract. Right now it's a negative. Okay, right now we were looking between these two because nothing's there. That means it's multiply. That means to get rid of the multiply, we divide. Okay, those turn into 1. 1p, we don't write the 1, bring down that. And then positive divided by a negative is negative. And 4.2 divided by 2.8 is 1.5. Okay, so that's pretty easy with the decimals because we can just use the calculator. No problem at all. All right, now let's get to the tricky bit. Let's remember particularly fraction division. Okay, this is what we need to remember. So when we have, say, 1/2 divided by 2/5, remember this is our keep, change, flip, but this is when I really want you to actually think of it as multiply by the reciprocal. Okay, so we're going to have 1/2, and then it changes to times, and we flip the second one. Okay, and then for multiplying fractions, you don't have to have a common denominator, though we have one in this case, but that comes out to be 5/2. And you finally made it to the part in algebra where you don't have to do anything with that. Reduce if you can, but you don't have to change it from an improper fraction to a mixed number. Okay, this comes into play when we have a fraction as a coefficient. Okay, for example, 3/4 x equals 12/20. They gave us two fractions. That's cool. Totally fine. So right now we have multiplication happening right here, right? It's 3/4 times x. So essentially what we need to do is divide by 3/4. But dividing by 3/4 is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. Can you see how 4/3 times 3/4 is going to reduce down to 1? Okay, so whatever we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. 4/3. Okay, so this we end up with 12/12, which is 1. So we have our x. And then over here, I'm going to do a little pre-reducing because I see that I can do that. 3 goes into 12 4 times, and 4 goes into 20 5 times, and we are left with 4/5. Okay, so really the key is dividing. Fraction division is multiplying by the reciprocal. And that's why I like to teach it that way, because that's, what it is. We could do it another way if you want to look at it a different way. It looks like I've showed this in previous years. So you could think of it as 3x over 4, because remember yesterday I said you can think of the x as being over 1, and then if we multiplied those together, you get 3x over 4 equals 20. And then we can do what we did yesterday. We've got to divide by 4, and so to undo this division, we can multiply by 4 to both sides, and that goes away, and we end up with 3x equals 80. And then we divide by 3 and divide by 3, and we get x equals 3 goes into 8 2 times. I don't think this comes out to be the same. Did I use the right? Oh, because it's 12/20. Ha ha ha! That's just kidding. 12/20. That feels better. Okay, 12/20. Whew! 4 goes into 20. Remember, that's going to be 4 over 1. 4 goes into 25 times. So right now we have 12/5. And then we divide that by 3. What am I doing? I don't know. It's working out. Divide that by 3. Dividing by 3 is the same thing as multiplying by 1/3. So over here, we're going to multiply by 1/3, and we end up, really 3 goes into 12 4 times, and we still end up with 4/5. All right then. I don't know what I was doing something different when this wasn't a fraction. Sorry, I'm looking at the notes from last year going, what was I doing? Anyway, you can see how that one can get a little bit tricky. So if we just remember to multiply by the reciprocal, we're good to go. So let's practice this a bunch more times so that you can keep it in your head. -7/9 d equals 5. -7/9 d equals 5. Okay, so right now this is not a subtract, that's a negative. We're multiplying by 7/9. So to undo multiplication, we'll divide, but dividing for fractions is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So we flip it and multiply. Don't forget your negative. Okay, and you can see that 9 goes into 9, 7 goes into 7, it all turns into 1, so we just have our d. And then over here, remember, with a whole number multiplied by a fraction, you just put the whole number over 1, then you multiply across, and a positive times a negative is negative. 5 times 9 is 45. 1 times 7 is 7. Okay, now you can totally just leave it right there in that form. 7 doesn't go into 45, so it doesn't reduce anymore. So you don't have to change it into a mixed number. Like I said in algebra, we don't do that anymore because improper fractions are so much easier to do the math with. Okay, I need to do, of course they give you different problems then. All right, let me, here we go. -6 1/4 equals 3/5 c. Okay, that's pretty tricky stuff happening here. Right now, what's with our variable is 3/5. So we need to divide by 3/5, which is the same thing as multiplying by 5/3. Tricky bit is we have a mixed number here and we can't really do the math with that. So let's change this to an improper fraction. 4 times 6 is 24 times 1. This is 25/4 and it's negative. Okay, and now we're going to multiply both sides by 5/3. Okay, those turn into 1. So on this side we have C. Over here, we're going to end up with 12 on the bottom. Here, we'll do that. Because it's not minus, it's multiply. So it's negative 12, and on the top is 125. Okay, and again, you can just leave it like that, or if you want to, you can absolutely change it to a mixed number, which would be negative 10 and 5/12. Okay, the assignment today, I will have both available. Okay, let's practice a story problem just so that you remember that we have story problems. All right, Valerie needs 2/3. Valerie needs 2/3 yards of fabric to make each hat for the school play. Write and solve an equation to find out how many hats she can make with 6 yards of fabric. Okay, so I'm going to call the hat H. She needs 2/3 of yard of fabric to make each hat for the school. So 2/3 times H. And I want to know how many I can make with 6 yards of fabric. All right, and there we go. That's how you set it up. Again, we need to divide both sides by 2/3, but fraction division is multiplying by the reciprocal. So multiply by 3/2. Those turn into 1. And then over here, 2 goes into 6 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. We can make 9 hats. All right. Hopefully that's making a little bit of sense. You just have to remember multiply by the reciprocal. Good luck.